make sure I'm doing this in graphs and terminology that you're comfortable with, because honestly I don't remember exactly how we phrased it before. What I want to do is talk about, I think we talked about it before, aggregate supply and aggregate demand. Sound familiar? Well, I'm going to show you an aggregate supply curve that looks like that. It's flat, then it begins to curve, and then it becomes vertical. Aggregate supply is the amount of production going on in our economy. And that's what we're measuring down here on the horizontal axis, Q or GDP. This curve becomes vertical. Let me get a little more room here. This supply curve is vertical when you are at a fully employed economy. That means everybody's working who wants to work, with two exceptions. Even at full employment, our unemployment rate is going to be, give or take, 5%. That's called the natural rate of unemployment. It is natural for our economy to have about 5% unemployment. Why? Two reasons. Frictional or transitional unemployment, people between jobs. And structural unemployment. People whose job skills are outdated. People who can't move to get another job. People who are discriminated against. So you have frictional unemployment, also called transitional, and you have structural unemployment. The problem with the high unemployment that we've had for several years now is that a lot of people's job skills are beginning to, what's the word I want? Deteriorate. There's another term for it. I can't remember it, but they're kind of, if you haven't worked for the last 2 years, some of your job skills, to include maybe your work ethic, your self-discipline, your organization, have deteriorated. And so maybe there's an element of some structural unemployment out there we're going to have to overcome to get everybody back to work. And then, of course, when you get talking about immigration and illegal immigrants, I personally think that stirs up more animosity against minorities and causes some more structural unemployment to occur. Now, the object of the game for you and me and for our economy is to operate out here, full employment. Frequently, most of the time, we're operating somewhere in here, where we have a higher level of unemployment and a lower level of output. We have less GDP, more unemployed. And where we operate depends on where we draw the demand curve. So let's start out and draw it down here at a pretty bad time. Aggregate demand 1. Aggregate demand is total spending. There's how much do we produce and how much do we buy. And wherever they intersect is our equilibrium. And we look at that particularly by measuring down, and let's say that this gives us Q1. That's our level of output. It is less than full employment. So what's going on in most businesses? How's business? Down. Sales are down. Lots of employees have been laid off. And the unemployment rate is relatively high. Make it 11% just for grins. That's a pretty tough time. In the Great Depression in 1933, unemployment reached 25%. And that was in a society, a culture where in most homes you had a single income. So 25% unemployment back then was even worse than it would be today. Okay? So it was atrocious. In 1981, is that right? Yeah, about 1980, 81, unemployment reached 11% because we were trying to damp down inflation. And now in this particular dreary economy since 2008, unemployment has gone as high as 9.1%. It's back down now at 8, but a lot of those people now in this recession have been unemployed for a longer period of time than any time since the Great Depression. So we're having a pretty rough time with the economy. The object of the game in macroeconomics is to understand what's going on and then talk about how do we fix it. The usual approach to how do we fix it is how do we get more spending in the economy. Now, we've talked about that before when we talked about stimulus and austerity. How do you stimulate the economy and get more spending to take place? Reduce taxes or increase government spending. We usually talk in terms of government spending because we can make that happen. But we can't make people spend more money. We can't make businesses spend more money.
What about when they just create more money?
They can print more money, and in fact, the Fed has been doing that.
Right, I know when they've been doing that.
Yes.
Doesn't that decrease our dollar worth?
It has the potential to do so, and in a normal economy, absolutely would. Today, we're in a different situation that I want to get to probably the next time we meet.
Okay.
It's something called a liquidity trap. Interest rates are so low right now, nobody wants to invest, and that money is not being funneled into more and more spending in the sense that it creates inflation. Okay. It has the potential to create huge inflation when we get out of the mess we're in. And the Fed knows that when we start recovering, they've got to start bringing that money back, shrinking the money supply without crashing the economy. So there's where we're going.
Yeah, they've announced that they've printed more several times.
Oh yeah. And it's because they want to keep interest rates low, and they want to keep the economy very liquid, so that when we finally get our heads on straight, we're ready to go out and borrow money, spend money, and stimulate the economy. Okay. Now the alternative to that was to say, oh, we're really worried that all that money is going to create inflation, so let's bring all the money back in, and that'll drive interest rates sky high. And that's kind of the second part of what we're going to do tonight, is talk about monetary policy. But for right now, what we've talked about before, government spending or taxes to move the demand curve. Government spending and taxes, we call those fiscal policy, right? That's the Congress carrying out fiscal policy. Now, some folks out there will tell you that fiscal policy doesn't work. These are kind of the neoclassical economists, and in large part the spokespersons for the economics of the Republican and right-wing side of our system. They pretty well destroyed those arguments in the Great Depression. They pretty well destroyed them as a result of Roosevelt and the New Deal. They pretty well destroyed them in the conduct of economic policy and the well-being of the economy over the last 50 years. And now, in my opinion, a lot of those folks are going back and rewriting history to suit their theory, which isn't quite right. People who believe strongly in fiscal policy are usually referred to as Keynesian type economists.
My last economics teacher was a Keynesian.
Yeah. I'm probably more Keynesian than I am classical by a large measure. The problem with Keynesian economics is it assumes government can fix everything. More government spending, lower taxes. And the result of that is government tends to grow and do things maybe beyond its scope. The classical are the opposite.
Who's the other guy? The other?
Milton Friedman?
No, Keynesian and
Hayek?
Hayek.
Yeah. The counter to fiscal policy are the neoclassicals, and probably the two spokesmen for their views historically have been Milton Friedman and Friedrich Hayek. I forgot how he spells his name. Hayek. They're the ones that are big on, we don't need no stinking government. Government's too big and government creates all the problems. These are the ones that are probably too big on government can fix it, let's have another policy and raise your taxes so government can fix that too. So the truth is somewhere out there in the middle.